Entitled mother demands free private tutoring or she'll get me fired. So for context, I used to be a teacher at an English school here in Brazil. Most of my students were young kids, and usually the other teachers would send me the kids who had some difficulties in learning. That was probably because I'd do little games and different activities that often motivated them during class. Most teachers wouldn't do things like that because we were only paid for the time we spend doing school things. So I kind of worked extra for free, but I didn't care as long as the kids were happy. Well, then there was this kid that the other teacher said was a nightmare. I related to him really quickly, and it was quite clear to me that he had ADHD. And so do I, so it wasn't hard to find a way to make him interested in my classes. But the fun didn't last long. His mum called me one day and it went, "Hey darling, how are you?" "Oh, I'm fine, what about you? Is there anything I can help you with?" "Oh, I'm so glad you asked. My son is enjoying your classes very much. He told me you play games with him and such." "I'm really happy to hear that. I find games a really good way to learn." He said the same. "So I came to talk to you about something. I've already contacted the school and they said it was a great idea. So I'd like you to spend some time with my son and play a lot of educational games with him." "So you want me to give him extra English classes? Well, my schedule is quite busy these days, so I'm not sure if I can do it, but there are a bunch of other teachers at the school." "Oh, don't worry about it. I'll contact the school and you won't need to teach any other kid, so you can focus on my son and teach him everything he needs to know for school." "You want me to teach him every school subject?" Yes. You're his private teacher." "I'm only qualified to teach English for beginners. I can't teach anything else. And I want to keep the classes I already have."
"But he can only learn from you. He needs you."
"Well, look, maybe I can try and give him a few classes, but I'll have to charge the same amount as I'd get at the school, since I'd be leaving that job in order to work for you."
"What do you mean, charge?"
"I mean, get paid."
"I didn't know I had to pay you. I already paid the school. I don't need to pay you."
"I'm an employee at the English school. You pay them for English classes."
"But you said you're not qualified. It doesn't make sense to pay you."
"If you want someone qualified, there are a bunch of private teachers out there who can do amazing jobs, especially with kids that can't learn easily."
"But their prices are too high. You're being petty. You know it's difficult not being normal."
"You shouldn't use those words about your son, you know. Your kid is really smart, he just needs a little bit more motivation. You can do that yourself if you try."
"Are you calling me a bad mom? You know what, I'll get your butt fired from this school."
Well, she did try, and my boss told me to do the job even if I wasn't getting paid, because the mum was popular or something in the area, and it would be a bad thing if she talked trash about the school. I left that job after 2 weeks because they would do anything to keep the students. And I was underpaid. Was I the jerk? No. I hardly think that anyone could blame you for not wanting to do a whole bunch of extra unpaid work. And sure, you can ask for this kind of thing, but you don't get to tear low-wage workers a new one for not wanting to double their workload to help one kid for free. That kid themselves sounds like a pretty swell person, so let's not blame them for their mother being kind of an entitled sack of crap who thinks their son is some kind of freak of nature, for having what is by all means a pretty common condition in any schooling system. Also, screw your boss for just saying that you should have done all the extra work for free and not backing you up. And because this lady was popular? Yeah, I don't know what's going on there and why that would be a factor. If you want your kids to do well, you need to put in the effort, either by paying for tutors or researching good ways to help them yourself at home. Am I the jerk for not letting my parents into my son's life after they secretly tested his DNA? I met my wife Sonia at a restaurant where she worked as a waitress. It took me a while to finally be her boyfriend. I introduced her to my parents and they voiced out their disapproval after meeting her. My parents think that Sonia is only using me to achieve her American dream. I told them that's racist and I was very offended by their assumption. After my now wife accepted my marriage proposal, we asked for both of our families' blessings. Her parents were happy for us, but my parents were gutted and refused to give their blessing. Because of this, we decided to elope and only invite my brother and Sonia's best friends to be our witnesses. Long story short, now that we're 2 years married and after we welcomed our first child, my parents started to reach out to us again. My kind-hearted wife didn't think twice to welcome the parents into our lives. She let them meet our baby 2 days after being discharged from the hospital. My parents visited us regularly, and one day while Dad and Mum were playing with Gareth, my mum said something along the lines of, "Aren't you the cutest baby ever? I'm so glad to confirm that you're indeed my grandson." She didn't know I was around because she looked startled when I said, "What's that supposed to mean?" My mum tried to change the subject, but I insisted she tell me what she was talking about. Mum sat me down and apologized first before telling me that they had Gareth's DNA tested to make sure that he was mine. I was speechless for a moment before I blew up from anger, and I told my dad to give me my son and that they'd better leave before I lose whatever respect I had left for them. My mum was very apologetic and said it was because they didn't trust my wife and that our son looks nothing like me. I didn't argue anymore and told them to get out of the house. My wife was in the kitchen preparing for lunch, and I told her that my parents had an emergency and that's why they left without saying a word. I didn't tell my wife about the whole DNA test thing until 2 weeks later, when she asked why my mum and dad didn't visit anymore. I told her everything, as I know I can't keep a secret from her. She started crying and it broke my heart. I know how much she tried to win my parents' approval, and what I told her was like a slap across her face. That night she told me she could no longer let my parents into our child's life, and I agreed with her. When my mum called to ask when they could visit again, I told her they're no longer welcome in my son's life. Mum called Dad and I told him the same thing. He was livid, he called me ungrateful and cruel. He also said a few choice words about my wife, which angered me more. I didn't even hear the rest because I just hung up. Did I overreact? Am I the jerk? Nope, not the jerk at all, and you do not need their racist and judgmental examples in your kid's life going forward. Look, I'm all for the idea that people can change and better themselves over time, and for a while there it really looked like that might have been the case. But no. Turns out they were just being their usual prejudiced and spiteful selves under a veneer of just needing to do a covert operation to prove whether the woman their son had married was cheating on him, because they didn't trust her for reasons. And having their suspicions because of her skin color was not the right assumption to make. Then, when you made your choice to rightfully bar them from your life, they showed their true colors once more. Good on you for supporting your spouse from the get-go and standing with her whenever your nasty relatives acted up. I think the eloping and bringing along your brother, who was presumably less awful, was the right thing to do.
I didn't pay for this seat, but you should give it to me anyways.
There's some context needed to this story. My brother is very tall, 6'5" to be precise. Whenever he and I go back east for vacation, we get aisle seats in Comfort Plus for that oh-so-necessary few extra inches of legroom. It's the only seat he can fit in. We board fairly early and settle in very quickly. As the boarding process continues, a woman approaches him and asks him to switch seats with her. She explains that she wants to sit next to her husband, who's in the seat next to my brother, but she ended up being a few seat rows back. He says yes and goes back to her seat, and then realizes she failed to mention that she was seated in economy, which poses a huge problem as he cannot fit. He came back and very kindly explained the problem and also explained that he paid extra for the Comfort Plus for a reason. Her face completely changes in color as she starts lecturing him on how unfair it is that he won't give up his seat. He stands there unwavering until she goes back to the seat she did pay for, and he sits back down comfortably in his seat. I mouth, "What the hell?" to him, and he laughs and shrugs his shoulders. By the way, this lady never asked a flight attendant for help in being seated next to her husband. I finally realized that they probably plotted to only buy one Comfort Plus seat and to rely on the kindness of strangers for a free upgrade. If you didn't pay for that seat, why would you be surprised when you didn't get it? And how can you have the gall to complain to someone who did in fact pay for it for their own comfort? Maybe if they want to sit together so bad, the husband could have gone back and offered his Comfort Plus seat to his wife's neighbor in economy so that he and his wife could sit together. I'm sure nobody in economy is going to turn down a more comfortable spot. Could these two have not considered that option, or is it entirely possible that they are cheap jerks who want two nice seats for the price of one? I don't know that one would plan too far ahead for that kind of grift, but you never know with the people we run into on here. There have been wackier schemes with lower stakes. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, linked below. Also, go to AmITheJerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. Am I the jerk for telling my husband that since he didn't help funding my mother's healthcare, I'll do with the inheritance what I want? I'm a 29-year-old stay-at-home mum. I take care of my home and my son, who's 4, while my husband Sam works. I haven't had a job in 4 years as Sam wanted me to be a stay-at-home mum by the time our son was born. I accepted since Sam has an absurdly good salary and mine was not that great. My mum fell ill half a year ago. Her diabetes became quite complicated and she needed some medical care. We don't live in the US, so the expenses were relatively small. I asked Sam to please give me half of the total medical bill, since my brother, who's 25, was going to pay the other half. Sam refused to pay a penny from the bill, and since I have no income, my brother had to pay it all. Sadly, my mum passed away a month ago. My brother and I just got the whole estate in order. Each of us is going to get a somewhat considerable figure since my mother had some properties, which she didn't sell as they're in poor condition. This morning, my husband told me he wants me to sell my part of the inheritance so we can make some non-vital house repairs and possibly go on vacation. I laughed, more out of anger than anything else, and told him he had no right to suggest how to make use of the inheritance that my mother left when he refused to pay even half of her medical bills. He called me an entitled jerk and went to work. I got a call from his sister who was extremely angry. She called me irrational and told me that since I was living off the money Sam earns, I have no right to demand money from him, and that the inheritance gives me the opportunity to return some of the money he's spent on me. The call really got me thinking, and now I'm wondering if I really am behaving like that. As an update, I received a lot of comments asking the same questions, so I'll answer them on here. First, if my mum had such a large inheritance to leave us, why couldn't she just pay for her own treatment? My mum didn't leave us cash, she left us properties, 4 in total. These properties are basically in ruins and need a ton of work done, so my mum didn't receive any income from them. She placed 2 of them for sale, but they never sold, since the real estate market is extremely expensive here. Second, why didn't my mum pay for her main treatment? My mum paid the hospital her entire treatment there, meaning her hospitalization and the larger procedures. My brother and I wanted to help her with medical appointments. She visited several specialists outside the hospital, as well as her medicines, which the hospital didn't cover. That's why I said that the expenses were relatively small. Apologies if my redaction was confusing. And third, my husband has a very good salary, but we're by no means millionaires. He earns about 12,000 American dollars a month. Okay, Sam can F right off as far as the narrator is concerned. I might have had some more sympathy for him if you hadn't detailed right at the start that he had wanted you to be a stay-at-home parent in the first place. We have limited insight here, but it sure seems like he wants to control your finances. This can turn into a very manipulative and unequal situation where he has complete control over you, and you should monitor it very closely and possibly consider getting a job when you have the time and energy. Honestly, I would see a specialist or maybe give your brother your shares of what your mother left you, until you can be sure that you can protect your ownership of that inheritance. Stay the course and watch out for more red flags that might suggest he's trying to control you. Am I the jerk for asking my aunt what part of the male anatomy was required to operate a toy? So I, a 26-year-old woman, am expecting my first daughter with my husband in September. I grew up in a moderately religious household with pretty strictly defined gender roles. As in, since I was a girl, I had chores around the house while my younger brother didn't have to do anything. I don't talk to my parents for a variety of reasons, going on year 5 now, so they don't know I'm pregnant. Both my aunts and grandparents were very supportive of me leaving my household, and as such have been my main family. Being 6 months pregnant now, people have started to give gifts, and I'm very grateful for them. We've decided that we don't want our daughter to be surrounded by pink everything with only girl things. So we've made a conscious effort to include traditionally boy outfits and toys like dinosaurs and cars. We've told people that any gender items would be accepted, and if it's getting too much pink, we've gone out to balance a bit, getting a green jacket or something. My younger aunt has taken great offense to this because boys are boys and girls are girls. And she's a very loud and verbal person and has let us know several times her opinions. She has 2 boys. At my baby shower, my older aunt gifted us a book called Good Night Construction Site and a little stuffed truck. My younger aunt went on a tirade about how we're somehow making our daughter trans and not allowing her to be a girl. And my aunt is a very loud person, so of course her saying this was more like a yell and in front of my very liberal in-laws, who were very supportive of our choice. Pregnancy hormones took over and I grabbed the toy, gave it to my younger aunt and asked her what part of the Johnson was needed to operate this toy truck. She yelled that's not what she meant and left. The rest of the baby shower went fine, but it was a bit awkward after. Since then, the same aunt has been blowing up Facebook where a bunch of people agree with her that I'm making my daughter trans, and they've been telling me that I was the jerk. The rest of my relatives think what we're doing is fine, but that I shouldn't have handled it that particular way. And I'm just editing this to add I wasn't expecting so many responses. To answer some questions, I don't actually care if my daughter ends up loving pink and unicorns and being a girly girl. If she does, we'll get her them. I was just trying to balance out the sheer amount of pink items we were getting from friends and family. Almost every single gift has been heavily pink or girl-influenced, to the point where she wouldn't be dressed in anything but pink if we didn't go out and buy some more boy things. I'm also generally not a person who argues, but I did feel like a bit of a jerk because I intentionally made my comment to my aunt as deadpan serious as I could, and with the intent to embarrass her in front of our family members who were present. My delivery and question did have the intended effect and she went quite red before leaving. It was also the first transphobic comment I've ever heard come out of her mouth. While we all grew up quite conservative, my older aunt coming out 27 years ago really changed my family's perspective. My grandparents have changed from what they previously viewed, and my aunt was always supportive of my other aunt. My younger aunt always wanted a girl, so I thought she was just trying to act out her fantasy girl with all of her gifts and preferences. So, was I the jerk? Ah, so you have that relative. My condolences. Some of us do have to go through seeing old friends or family go down this path, and we might try to argue with them or just let them go down that road and never talk to them again. But very rarely do we receive direct attacks from strangers on social media because of it. It doesn't sound like you're trying to groom your kid, so much as to allow them to choose whatever avenue they want to go down in life. If being traditional means brainwashing them with things that you think their gender should like, how on earth would you say that letting kids choose their own way or things that they like is some sort of sick control problem? I also love your exact response and admittedly kind of abrupt way of asking her why you'd need to be a man to use a construction vehicle. I can't imagine not being able to play with whatever toys I wanted because of my gender, so well done to you for sticking up for your kid. You need a doctor's note to prove sickness or we'll sack you. I was reminded of this because of another story, and my one happened almost 20 years ago. I'd been working away in a restaurant and had just finished a Saturday day shift. It wasn't common to get a Saturday night off, as it was our busiest night, and the boss was making me feel I should be offering to do overtime because my workplace was being so kind to me. The last hour of my shift, I started feeling really crappy. By the time I got home, I was exploding at both ends and really miserable. I was hoping I'd feel better the next morning, but I still felt terrible. I dutifully phoned in sick because I couldn't be around food until I had been chucking and Brown River free for 24 hours. My boss immediately assumed I was hungover and threatened to fire me for letting everyone down. I said fine because I wasn't about to go into work. At the time, my flatmate was helping the same restaurant out because they were short a chef. He goes into work and was telling my boss how sick I was. He didn't know I'd been threatened, but it meant that my boss phoned me back and said if I could provide a sick note for the day, I wouldn't lose my job. At this time, my job was paying about £300 a week, and a doctor's appointment and a sick note were going to set me back about £100. Fine. If you're going to assume the worst about me when I'd never phoned in sick before, done. I got the grumpiest doctor who was angry that I made an appointment for this when he had actual seriously ill people who needed to see him. The doctor signed me off for a full week. Instead of helping me out to cover one of my shifts, they had to cover another 5 shifts, and I got a week off paid. Haha! Take that, hospo bosses! A lot of people I know understand the pain of working a restaurant job while rocking an illness that you probably shouldn't be serving food with, either because you're too poor not to go into work or just because restaurants tend to be that good at guilting people into working so that they can not have to cover shifts and move people around. I didn't realize that doctors would get furious about that sort of thing, but I guess if they are passionate and really want to help actual sick people, then it would make complete sense. I guess if you really think that the staff member is lying to you, ask for a note. Otherwise, why make them drag their sorry butts to a doctor instead of staying home and resting? When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories. Or if you want to check out some great music, check out easymode.com. If you like Am I the Jerk, give Am I the Genius a shot. Everything linked in the description.